No questions. Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier has given two reasons for the irresponsible change to the early French immersion. A report from 2012 and his own election platform. I have already offered my opinion on the 2012 report, which was very narrow in scope and attendance by invitation only. The Liberal election platform promise, well, was another ill-conceived idea that was contrary to the 10-year plan, which was also an election promise. Let's pick the one that makes the most sense. I'll vote for the 10-year plan. I am asking the Premier to start looking forward rather than backward. Let's look at the current situation. No children in the Grade 3 immersion program has yet to complete. Therefore, we have no complete data to support this decision to change the entry point. The Premier's own 10-year plan author was not recommending this change. Leave it alone. It'll create chaos, Karen Powers says. Once again, I will ask the Premier to put our children first and politics second. Will he put a halt to this change to early immersion?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we are putting children first here with our 10-year education plans. We are looking at investing the most in education, more than that government ever did. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the Leader of the Opposition here today is talking about trying to do things better. When they were in government, they cut in education. That's why we're in some of the predicament we are right now. So we are going to be honouring our political platform that we put in on letting New Brunswickers know that this is what we're getting elected on. We all know, even the opposition said earlier is better. So today, what we see here right now is the opposition always trying to find a wedge issue and fear-monger here, Mr. Speaker. We want to be able to advance our education system and have the best education system in the province that we've never seen before. So that's what we're doing today. We're talking to stakeholders with our extensive consultation in the last couple of years. We've done more consultation with teachers, parents, educators, the business community, Mr. Speaker, and we feel that we're doing the right thing to move forward.
Prime Minister, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's really interesting that a program that did exist and the results are not good at all, we're recycling and putting it back in. And we're saying that is progress, that's going to move forward, that's going to get different results. We do the same thing and expect a different result. In less than 3 weeks, the 2015 results will be released from the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. On December 6th, we will get these results. This year, the focus of the release will be on science. PISA testing is done with 15-year-old students and gives us an indication how our New Brunswick results in reading, math, and science compare with the rest of Canada and the rest of the world. Needless to say, our New Brunswick results have been very, very concerning for a number of years under various governments. The results tell us we need to fix our broken system in order to give our children and the education that we need to compete globally. Does the Premier agree that we need to fix this system to give our children the education they need and the education they deserve? Our standards need to be higher, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, we hear the Leader of the Opposition saying our system is broken. Again, this is a disgrace what we're hearing here today. We do have improvements to make, and that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. We've been very aggressive every day saying and working on making improvements to our education system, not on just math and literacy, but on many other fronts, Mr. Speaker. We're investing more than any other government in history and education, and we're going to have the results being proven in the years to come. If we just sat on our hands like the opposition did for 4 years in education, we'd never get anywhere, Mr. Speaker. We have to make bold decisions. That's why we're working with our teachers. We're working with all our community leaders. We're working with different people. And we're asking the opposition to come and work with us. But what we see here today, again, is trying to divide and conquer here, Mr. Speaker, and we think this is wrong. We have to have respect for our communities, and Mr. Speaker, that's what we're doing with the proper consultation, working with everybody to make sure we have the best education system moving forward. Thank you.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
The offer to work together rings hollow. I have mentioned how many times in this House I wanted to meet with the Premier and discuss how we build a 10-year plan that lasts beyond elections. I make no excuses. I make no issues about the past performance of any government. We have an education system that is indeed broken. Teachers in the classroom are telling me this. They're telling me this every day. I'm getting new emails. You're seeing more in letters to the editor. I'm seeing it when I talk to teachers. Oh, I can't really talk about this, but this is a problem. I'm hoping the teachers rise up and really say, I can fix this if you guys would just listen. The Francophone East District Education Council is another voice added to the chorus of concern over the latest provincial assessment results. In that district, less than 10% of the grade 6 students met or exceeded grade level math skills on a new provincial test. All of the district schools fell below the 2016 provincial average on 20%, and far below the province's targeting of seeing 85% of students working at or above grade level. Given the enormous public concern, will the Premier make a commitment today to make all these assessments and information public?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Again, we see here that he's saying the system is broken. You know, that is disgraceful to hear this every day from the opposition talking about our teachers here in the province. I met with teachers. I was with teachers the other night talking to them, and they don't really appreciate this, Mr. Speaker. They've said to me, yes, we know there's some issues right now, we know there's some challenges, but they want to work with our government to move forward. We've met so many people. In fact, the Premier and myself spent a full afternoon with teachers and principals from around the province, and they voiced their opinions. And yes, we've listened to what's taking place, but we've made a commitment. We're moving forward with this here, and we're going to work and put the proper resources in place to make sure that we have the best system possible. I extend the opposition to work with me, and I know we've had a few meetings before, but here in the legislature, getting up and grandstanding and saying that the system is broken is wrong, Mr. Speaker. We need to work together to move forward. They have their opinion, but again, at the same time, we cannot be degrading our teachers in this province.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
The facts speak for themselves. I'm not talking about a system that's working and all the results show it. I'm talking about a system that is obviously not working and all the results prove it. That's the reason. We want to talk about developing a 10-year plan that goes beyond elections. I'm all for it. Let's do it, and I'm right in. I'll meet at any time, any place. But Mr. Speaker, the minister has said just recently in the legislature that, well, I don't know, not everybody has to make good marks. You know, look at me, I'm doing fine, and I didn't make good marks. You know, we want better for our kids. It's not about mediocrity. It's about being the best. The education assessments that produce such troubling results need to be examined in great detail. How did we arrive at these results? I understand that for how did we arrive at these? I understand that for the upteenth time, the whole assessment process was rejigged in the last couple of years. Will we continue to request an account of the standards that students fail to meet? Will the Premier agree to work with us to get this information so we can move forward collectively in the right manner?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, one thing we will agree, okay, yes, we will work with you, but again, we see this negative attitude here every day. Look, we know at a point in time right now, we see assessments, yes, we have to improve on that. And that's what we're doing. We're working with our stakeholders. We're putting the proper resources in place to be able to improve on that. We want to work with everybody in here. The system is not perfect, we understand that. But at the same time, we think there's some great things happening in our education system throughout the province. From every corner of the province, I've had a chance to be able to move and tour around the province and meet great leaders in our communities, in our schools, and they take pride in what they do. And yes, we know there's some stress in the system. We understand that. But that's why we're putting the proper resources in place. We're hiring teachers, and we're going to be able to make sure that we have the best curriculum, the best resources in place to make sure that we can get New Brunswickers to learn the best at their ability, Mr. Speaker. And I do believe by working together with everybody in New Brunswick, we will have the best education system moving forward, no doubt.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, does working together with everyone in this province include allowing the teachers in the classroom a voice so they can be heard? We're going to fix our education system. Real teachers from real classrooms must have a voice. Classroom composition is an issue, and it must be addressed. Only classroom teachers can help us understand what the issues are with the composition and how to address this in the best possible way. The same holds true for the curriculum, as well as resources. Only classroom teachers can provide information, the experienced advice on what is needed in the classrooms. The solution to so many challenges rests in the wisdom and experience of our classroom teachers. Next week, the legislature is on recess, and I'll once again ask the Premier and the Minister of Education to sit down with me, and together let's figure out a way to give our classroom teachers a voice. Then we move forward. Let's not put in an ill-conceived program without a plan, a program we've already done it before, had poor results. Let's do it right together, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I've sat down 3 times with the Leader of the Opposition, and I'm going to get him to meet with us again and to meet with our department. And with anybody from the Opposition, come and see what we're doing here with the Department of Education. Our plans were with extensive consultation, Mr. Speaker. We've met with literally thousands of people to get their input on where we're moving forward. And I do agree with him, we're putting a 10-year plan in place to be able to have that stability, but also to have the flexibility so that teachers can bring the best of their abilities out throughout the province and share those ideas. 7 years, the principals never met because they muzzled the principals in this province. We invited them back to the table, and they totally enjoyed getting together to share those experiences. Mr. Speaker, I'll work with anybody to make sure we can have the improvements in place. I'll work with the opposition, and that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. We're showing true leadership on education. We'll invest the most in education, and we're listening to what's taking place, and we will have together the best education system, no doubt.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we've had emails from principals, and here's the quote. We've been listened to, but not heard. Mr. Speaker, I am not denying any past performance of any government. I'm saying let's start a new day here. Let's listen to the teachers in a meaningful way, the classroom teachers. Let's open their voices and say whatever you need. Don't worry about your job. We want this fixed. Let's decide what an educated student should look like and let them fix it. We have a golden opportunity to expand on your 10-year plan to bridge the gap of the political process. Let's not lose it. Defer an election promise that is ill thought out, ill-conceived, without a plan, and is going to affect how many? 90, 100, 200 teachers, and they're going to lose their jobs? Is that what we want, to start a new program, is to have that in place? Minister, the opportunity is right now for us to build an education system that we'll both be proud of. Will you please join me? Let's make it happen.
Minister of Education.
Again, a classic example of fear-monger, fear-monger, fear-monger. Every time they're saying the doom and gloom, Mr. Speaker. Well, let's reverse it here. Let's ask the opposition to work with us, because we do have a golden opportunity. We have a golden opportunity here, and that's why we've consulted extensively throughout the province with leading experts. When we've listened to teachers throughout the province, I get emails from teachers every day. I get emails from people around the province with their concerns. We're listening to that, and that's why we're going to have the proper resources in place. It's going to take some time, Mr. Speaker, and I do believe that by working together and not having the negative attitude here every day that's reported in the papers and so on, Mr. Speaker, that's the wrong approach. We thought we were going to have a leader of the opposition with a different attitude here, but it's back to the same old, just to try and get a headline. I want to work with the opposition. I invite you folks to work with us. I'll have a meeting as soon as we can get together to talk with our department staff to see the wonderful things that the staff are doing in
Minister. Member for Oromocto-Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the PC opposition has been working with the government. We've been working with the government on developing the 10-year plan. We applauded the government when they announced they were going to develop a 10-year plan. We participated with the government. We appreciated that opportunity, and so did the people of New Brunswick. The real disheartening point is that as soon as that 10-year plan was released, and not much longer after that, the minister and the premier dabbled their hands in the education system again and interfered into something that the teachers have said they do not want at this point in time. Mr. Speaker, the big question that parents are asking is why is the government making this change? What is wrong with the current grade 3? Is the problem with the current grade 3 the access and enrollment? Because we know the access and enrollment has gone up. We had 700 more students last year alone. Is it because of the results? Is that what the problem is with grade 3? Well, we don't know because the results aren't in yet. So can the minister tell us what is the problem with the grade 3?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we'll say it again. We've let New Brunswickers as this we were moving forward. We had the opposition saying that earlier is better, Mr. Speaker. We've worked with New Brunswickers to develop a plan. It's the former Minister of Education here that actually commissioned the plan in 2013 with leading experts around the province stating that this is the way to go. So we're looking at that. And what we're trying to find here from the opposition is a divide and conquer attitude here today to find a wedge issue here, Mr. Speaker. We all know we have improvement to do in our education system, and that's why we're working with our educators. We're working with our public. We're working with our parents. And Mr. Speaker, we will be moving forward with an extensive plan to be able to improve our education system in all fronts. And I do believe that by working together, and I'll repeat it again, it's the most important thing. We have to have a positive attitude in the communities, Mr. Speaker, and when we have doom and gloom coming from the opposition every day, it doesn't help the attitudes around the province about our education system.
Member for Oromocto Lincoln.
Mr. Speaker, in 2008, the Liberals said the old Grade 1 program wasn't working, and then they changed it. The Liberals said that it was broken and it needed to be fixed. The Liberals made those changes, and the reasons why they made those changes was because a lack of recruitment of bilingual teachers and the lack of support for struggling students. And now, Mr. Speaker, they have come back and said we will go and reverse that back to Grade 1 again. At the same time, there's a growing list of those opposed to this change right now, including the West, South, and now District East school district. 3 out of the 4 school districts have spoken publicly about this. We know that this change will require 200 English teachers will be put out of work, and at the same time, the government cannot recruit the bilingual ones. According to the 2012 report, the recruitment of bilingual teachers is a problem then, and it's a problem now. What will the minister specifically do to make this plan work in recruiting the teachers necessary?
Minister of Education.
We're working with our education department, we're working with our districts, we're working with our teachers to take a look at where it's going to go in the upcoming year. And Mr. Speaker, we'll have the resources put in place in time to be able to make sure we have an implementation in this year plan with grade 1 French immersion. Mr. Speaker, again, it's the former minister across that commissioned a report with experts around the province, and what they're saying every day here in the House is contradictory to what they were doing a few years ago. So what has changed, Mr. Speaker? It's very frustrating on this side of the House where we have the Leader of the Opposition saying, work with us. We're saying the opposite. We will work with you folks if you work with us. But what we see here today is a doom and gloom type of opposition that's trying to fearmonger to New Brunswickers. We want to put the positive out there that we have a good education system, we've got great educators in this province, and we're going to work with them to make sure we have the best education system in New Brunswick moving forward.
Member for Oromocto Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can tell the minister what's changed. What has changed is that the previous government listened to teachers, and this government is not listening to the teachers. The teachers told the previous government, despite politics, the teachers told the previous government, do not change the entry point at this time. And they've also told this government the same thing, yet this government ignores it. They ignore this input from the consultation plan, from the 10-year plan. They ignore this recommendation from the co-chair. They are ignoring this recommendation from 3 out of the 4 Anglophone school districts. At the same time, this 2012 report has 8 recommendations. Yet this government has failed to tell this legislature and the teachers and the parents how they will make this transition work because they failed to provide the information. And how can they expect parents to trust this government when they continue to ignore the input? The support wasn't there before. How will we guarantee the support will be there now? How can they trust you?
Education.
Mr. Speaker, you talk about trust here. How can we trust the former minister here who, with the Leader of Opposition, cut in education every year that they were there in the 4 years? They didn't have a plan, and right now what you're doing is you're cherry picking. You're trying to find a wedge issue here, Mr. Speaker. You decreased by $1 million, Mr. Speaker, and within coming into power with a 1% cut the first year, a 2% cut the next year. Mr. Speaker, it's very, very interesting here that they're trying to find an issue that they can grandstand here for the last couple of weeks here in the legislature, Mr. Speaker. What we're doing is we're working with New Brunswickers, we're working with the educators, and we will have a plan over the next 10 years that will have stability and to be able to give the resources for teachers to do the best job to improve our results and make sure we have the best students for New Brunswick here throughout the province from every corner of the province, Mr. Speaker. And I truly believe by working together and not fear-mongering, we will have a lot better results, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay to Bend.
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't help but notice all the blood drained from the Premier's face yesterday when I started asking questions about Enbridge lawyer and unofficial member of the public service, Len Hoyt. I saw the Premier give the Energy Minister a look that said, "You get up, my knees have gone weak." Of course, Len Hoyt has a government email address as a member of the Executive Council office, so there's no denying that fact. Of course, Hoyt is identified in a CBC story in January of 2014 as a company lawyer arguing against Enbridge living up to the 20% below electricity cost agreement. I'm very concerned that the Premier is forcing New Brunswickers to pay Enbridge $150 million because his Liberal advisor and Enbridge lawyer told him to. Is the Premier able to stand and address this?
Honourable Minister of Energy, Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm standing up and my legs aren't going shaky or weak this morning, but I just kind of find it interesting, the questions from the members opposite. Talk about doing things different, Mr. Speaker. Talk about doing things completely different, ripping up contracts. I mean, Mr. Speaker, the member from New Maryland, Sunbury West this morning, in his member statement was mentioned about, what was he said, change the rules. Well, they changed the rules, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we're in such a mess that we were. That's why there's no longer a lawsuit of $820 million that is going to have tremendous amount of impact on our economy, Mr. Speaker. Tremendous amount of impact on educational spending, impact on our health spending, on infrastructure and things like that. But the interesting part, Mr. Speaker, day 13 days since the deal was announced, Mr. Speaker, since the memorandum of understanding was announced, Mr. Speaker, and now we're just starting to talk about it, but I'm still not getting questions on it. Something I don't quite understand.
Prime Minister. Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, what we're not getting and what the citizens of New Brunswick aren't getting is an answer to the question. The Gallant government is defending the $150 million gift to the client of their lawyer pal by saying it headed off a big lawsuit brought by their lawyer pal and Enbridge against the government, which Len Hoyt now appears to be a part of. The appearance of this is just horrible. Launch a big lawsuit against the government and get your own way over the taxpayers of the province. If this is all it takes, perhaps Corridor Resources could hire Len Hoyt to launch a lawsuit for them so we can get moving on natural gas. Could the Premier confirm if all lawsuits must be at least $820 million, or will he fold for less? Will he speak up and address this perceived conflict of interest against the taxpayers of New Brunswick?
Order. Recognize the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know where to begin. But the fact of the matter is, $820 million, an erroneous amount of money, was going to be on the taxpayers' shoulders, Mr. Speaker, if we did not settle down and have some discussions and some dialogue with Enbridge on this file, Mr. Speaker. Dialogue is important, and I don't know if any of those members over there have been in business before, but if you've ever been involved in litigation, the first thing that comes up when you get to discovery, say, have the parties sat down and talked about this before you sit in front of a judge. And I think that's really important, Mr. Speaker, is we've had a willingness to work together, Mr. Speaker. That's a tremendous amount of erroneous. So I'm really proud of the fact that our government sat down and talked about this and tried to get to the bottom of this, Mr. Speaker, because it was a mess. It was a mess that was going to cost every single taxpayer in this province a lot of money, whether they burn gas or not, Mr. Speaker. Right. Whether you burn gas or not, you're going to be responsible for this, Mr. Speaker. So I think it's important.
Prime Minister. Recognize the member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, the first thing you do is declare your conflict. It is a scientific fact that natural gas is almost completely odorless. There has to be something added to natural gas to make it stink. In New Brunswick, we like to add the Gallant government and Len Hoyt. Then it really stinks. The government is giving Len Hoyt's client Enbridge a 50-year monopoly in removing pricing protection for gas customers. The hard-working people of New Brunswick will be hosed again. After the year 2020, gas rates can skyrocket. Why would the Premier do something like this, all behind closed doors and in a secret deal after promising a new approach and to be open and transparent? Why is this secret deal cooked up for Len Hoyt's customer Enbridge? And will the minister get on his feet and tell us if, in fact, Len Hoyt wrote this deal? Is this a conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker?
Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm getting a lot of zest from the other side there, Mr. Speaker. They're definitely starting things off right. They're doing things differently. Completely doing things differently, Mr. Speaker. So I guess this must be their tactic to it. But, Mr. Speaker, fact of the matter is, we just went through a strategic program review where we're trying to find $600 million in savings. Can you imagine the world we'd be living in if $820 million, if we lost this lawsuit, was booked directly on the files, Mr. Speaker, directly on the books of the province, Mr. Speaker? Not many people in the province knew about this. They did not know about this lawsuit. But if this came down and we had to pay out, everyone would know about it, Mr. Speaker. Fact of the matter is, we've got to clean up. You know, we've had to clean up the LaPro issue, Mr. Speaker, the billion-dollar cost overrun. We've had to clean up on the Coulson Cove issue, and that's been an ongoing thing for many years, Mr. Speaker. Also, the $150 million for Harbour Bridge. We can talk about that.
Recognize the leader of the third party.
Get re-elected, buddy.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2009, New Brunswick adopted a poverty reduction strategy with the explicit mandate to reduce poverty in New Brunswick. Since that time, Mr. Speaker, deep poverty has increased by 5%. Food bank usage, according to recent statistics, are the latest evidence of this. Since the poverty reduction strategy was launched, New Brunswick's food banks have seen a 26% increase in clients. Mr. Speaker, that's an extra 4,000 people each month. Will the minister responsible for families and children explain his plan to help families living in deep poverty?
Minister of Service, New Brunswick.
Thank you very much for the question. Rather than referring to food banks, we like to refer them now to food centers, in which we educate those who unfortunately have to use food banks in good nutrition, providing counseling in terms of being able to cook, and in terms of being able to develop community gardens in which they can produce their own food. So we're making changes in terms of educating the public in the importance of food, and especially for those who unfortunately have to use these food centers. So as government, I'm very, very proud in the new direction in which we're going. It's a direction in which we're educating those who have to use it in the importance of good nutrition, the importance of being self-sufficient, and the importance of developing pride.
Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, the fact remains that food bank usage has gone up by 26% since the poverty reduction strategy was launched. Mr. Speaker, and deep poverty has increased. Sean Pegg, the Director of Policy and Research for Food Banks Canada, was in the media this week discussing the annual survey and the results. According to him, people fall back on food banks for all kinds of reasons, including job loss, low wages, and sickness. In times of need, our social assistance programs are failing New Brunswickers, sending them to food banks across the province. Whatever you call them, Mr. Speaker, will the minister increase social assistance rates in the next budget so that those most in need have the resources they need to secure healthy meals? That's a solution, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister responsible for families and children.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great opportunity to get up and talk about this issue with regards to food centres. Our government is going to focus on jobs and education, Mr. Speaker, because that's the foundation where this is going to be happening, and making sure that families are resilient. We understand that if people can get jobs and better education, they won't have to rely so much on the food centres. We continue to talk with food centres around the province, and we'll continue to help them. We continue to pack groceries with the food center. It's about education. It's about education of healthy foods rather than foods that aren't so healthy with the people of New Brunswick. We will continue, and I want the member to know that New Brunswick is the only province in Canada that contributes to food centres. And I wonder if he knows that. So I'd ask the member to understand that we are helping people in this province, and we will continue to do so because we believe that we want to move this province forward to make this the best place to live, work, and raise a family.
Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, the minister doesn't seem to understand that poverty is increasing in this province, not improving. It's getting worse. 4% increase in deep poverty in The use of food banks is going through the roof, Mr. Speaker. More families are having to depend on food banks because they do not have the money to feed their families, Mr. Speaker. The short-term solution for that is to increase welfare rates, Mr. Speaker. The longer-term solution would be to adopt a basic income. The federal government's planning on adopting a national poverty reduction strategy with a basic income guarantee pilot study in a number of Canadian communities. So will the minister agree to open negotiations with his federal counterpart to establish a basic income pilot in our province?
The Honourable Minister responsible for families and children.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate standing up here today. I find it ironic that the members of the opposition are clapping for what the member of Fredericton South is saying.
Order.
They're against minimum wage.
That's right.
Cuts.
That's right.
And again, we are working with these people. We are working with all New Brunswickers. Again, New Brunswick is the only province that is contributing to food centres. We understand that jobs and education is the key and the foundation to help people. We want to continue that. And the member opposite knows that we are working hard. We are working hard with the federal government, the provincial government, and now, for the first time in a long time, that all three sets of governments and municipalities are working closer together to handle these issues. So we are very proud of what we're doing, and we'll continue to work hard for the people of the province of this New Brunswick.
Good job.
Time for question period has expired.